Welcome back to another YouTube video, and today we're going to be doing another question and answer. We've got 9 great questions that we're going to go through and be able to give you some information on. But before that, if you've liked these question and answer videos, something cool we're actually going to be doing on Powerlifting now starting in January is a monthly live stream where 1 month we're going to be doing a question and answer, and then another month we're going to be doing a form check and going back and forth between the two. And all of our subscribers can be able to access that live stream live and be able to interact with us, as well as if you're a subscriber, you'll be able to submit questions or be able to submit videos for the form check. The cool thing though, even if you're not a subscriber, is the video afterwards we are going to be uploading to our YouTube channel. So if you like to still be able to watch those, you can. You just won't be able to have access to them live, nor will you be able to submit the questions or form checks, but you'll still be able to see the videos and get that information on our new Powerlifting Now YouTube channel. So I'm going to include a link below so you can be able to click that and subscribe. So when we start uploading those, you'll have access to those where myself, Marcellus, Sean, and Matt will be putting out content there. So without further ado, let's get into the question and answer. And per normal, I'll include the question here so you can be able to see it as well as I'll read it. And the first one we have is, do you think it's better to do push dips, I'll just assume you mean weighted dips, instead of close grip bench press with a medium grip bencher? So I'm going to assume we're talking more accessory options here, because you're talking about the option of weighted dips versus close grip bench press, not replacing competition bench with more close grip bench press. And in that case, I'm definitely going to probably bias towards weighted dips, because if I'm looking at accessory options, even taking out weighted dips, I'm typically wanting to get away from the constraint of the barbell. We're constantly benching 2, 3, 4 times a week in this constrained position in the same motion, and I like to be able to get out of that to be able to tax someone in a different manner, whether that's trying to focus on different musculature or just get some variability in our movement. And then second, with weighted dips in particular, if you don't know already, I'm a big fan, and actually on our upcoming podcast for December on Powerlifting Now, we get into a pretty lengthy discussion about some of the specifics of weighted dips and maybe some overlooked factors of why they're so beneficial. And the main one we discuss is the fact that it's somewhat unique in the actual shoulder extension demands it has. It's one of the only movements that we're going into the end range of shoulder extension, and that being kind of the hardest part of the movement. There's not too many other accessory options or pressing movements we can do that really challenge shoulder extension in that manner. And I started to find a correlation of weighted dips to benchers who are more normal, medium grip, longer range of motion, not a big arch. Because the longer range of motion you have, the more shoulder extension you're going through, and the more importance that interior delt and the shoulder flexion coming back up is important. And I find a lot with people who have those more normal bench presses that we see a really, really good carryover from weighted dips to their actual bench press strength. Now, weighted dips can be great just in general with adding muscle and hypertrophy and that kind of stuff. But with those types of benchers, I often see the direct correlation that if we can increase their weighted dip strength, we see their bench go up as well. And I think it has a lot to do with that shoulder extension. So I think they're very unique in the fact of how they train that shoulder extension, which is why I think they're really, really beneficial for the example of a medium grip, long range of motion bench presser. So the next question is non-specific variation back down work the next trend in powerlifting? So this question I think kind of comes from the High Bar podcast, Sean Noriega's podcast. They recently just discussed this idea and bench setup that Aiden Rader has been using, that's using non-specific variations as the back down work. I've even talked about this on some Instagram posts. I don't know if I've kind of dived into it as much on YouTube, but I've had lifters where we might do a top set of competition squat and back downs with SSB for specific reasons. And I think it's a very useful strategy. I don't think it's new or novel. We even go back to Westside where they hit one max effort squat and they do a bunch of variations afterwards. It's the same exact thing. You're using these variations and the non-specific variations sometimes to be able to work in a different manner that we think will be useful to stress the musculature that might be getting understressed in sense, or looking at musculature that's getting overstressed and we want to pull back from that by using that less specific back down work. With that said, I don't think it likely would be the next big trend in powerlifting, and there's 2 reasons for it. I think it's incredibly beneficial. I think it's a really, really good strategy, but there's 2 things that I think kind of hold it back from being more mainstream. Is one, workout efficiency. just depending on the person. Not everyone has unlimited time to be in the gym, and so it's often more time efficient to limit the variation of movements. If we have 9 different movements we're going through, that's 9 times we're gonna have to get set up or warm up and stuff like that, versus if we can limit the amount of variations or types of movements we're doing. We can do squat, then we can do bench, and then we can do 1 to 2 accessories. It tends to be more time efficient, and most people are not full-time powerlifting or have the limited capabilities to spend time in the gym. So because of time efficiency, I don't think it's gonna be like a mainstream application. And then the second reason, which kind of goes along with the first reason, is to get to the point that you think that some non-specific back down work, like with Aiden, where he was doing, I think, like close grip incline after he did a top single on bench, or my lifter Autumn Green, who would do comp squat and then back downs with SSB. I think my lifter, I know my lifter Matt Kradimski does the same thing. To get to that point, you have to have pretty clear and concise data that you feel like you need that. And the fact is, the majority of powerlifters probably are not consistent or managing their variables enough to be able to see that extreme level of nuance. And so again, it goes back to, I think it's a very valid strategy, but are we likely going to see this applied in large scale? Likely not, because I think it's going to be hard to be able to find the application with the majority of powerlifters due to the inconsistencies and lack of variable control that they have. The next question is determining appropriate stance width on squat for your femur to torso length. So that's probably about an impossible topic to fully cover because there's so much that goes into that versus just simply your femur to torso length. There's also your hip anatomy. There's other factors too. If you want maybe a little bit more all-encompassing coverage of this question, David Wilson actually has a video on Powerlifting Now covering this. But what I want to do is, I think it would be really, really hard to give some like set standard. And like in David's video, he does not do that. Like, oh, you have long femurs and short torso, this is your stance width, so on and so forth. That's going to be probably inappropriate to give that type of information because it's just not going to be true or universally applicable. Instead, I think there's low-hanging fruit in just kind of having a general starting stance width. And there's a simple drill that I use if I'm not sure where most people should start to kind of give an idea. So let's look into this drill and explain what we're doing. So we're going to move inside the house so I have a little bit more room to move. So this drill, like I said, I think it's really good to get a starting point. It does not mean this is the end-all be-all that this should be your stance width. There's a lot of other factors that go into it. But I think this will give most people a good starting point. And what this drill is really trying to achieve is finding where is my stance width and position that allows me the best depth, because a lot of times that's one of our biggest constraints within powerlifting is what's the stance width that allows us to move through a full range of motion and hit powerlifting depth. So what you'll do is on your back, have your back completely flat, have your legs up at a 90-degree angle at the hip and a 90-degree angle at the knee, and really be strict on making sure to keep that back flat on the floor. And then from there, what you want to do is pull your knees towards your hips. And you can see that's as far as I can go. I run out of room. And so from this angle, you will see, like I said, feet together. From there, very slowly, allow those knees to travel out. And you're gonna find at a certain point, which for me about right here, I'm gonna maximize my range of motion. If I keep going wider, I actually start losing range of motion. And so right here for me is the stance width that gives me the most range of motion at my hips and therefore likely gives me the most depth and range to move within powerlifting rules. So with that drill, it doesn't mean that that is 100% guaranteed to be the stance width you should be using, but I think if you are not sure, it's gonna offer you a good starting point, and then from there, you're likely gonna be within a spectrum of where that is, because like I said, if you go for me, if I go too narrow, probably can't hit depth. I go too wide, probably can't hit depth. It just depends on the person. Some people are gonna be able to go wider and wider and wider and continue to get more range of motion. Some people are gonna be narrow and get range of motion. Everyone's hip's different. We're not gonna have an x-ray to be able to see our hip anatomy, know exactly what we need to be able to do. So that offers us a very, very simple, low-hanging option to be able to get a starting point of what our stance width should be. The next question is what to do the week after the meet. So if you've watched a lot of my content, I've had this same opinion for a while and really haven't changed it too much. But my general opinion is, for the most part, if you can, you should probably take off, or at least take a little bit of a step back. I think most people just need that mental break. I've had way too many times where we just hop back into training and someone gets burnt out halfway through that first block because they never really got time to just kind of relax, just kind of decompress, miss training a little bit before kind of hopping right back into it. With that said though, do not just entirely take the week off. Usually what I'll have people do is earlier in the week take off, and then later in the week start getting into the gym and just start moving, whether that's accessory movements, maybe by Saturday doing some squat, bench, and deadlift. And the reason why is inherently when you peak for meet, the moment you're done with that meet, you are in a sense detrained because you're trying to maintain fitness while dissipating fatigue at the perfect time. And then inherently after that, you would then be detrained because you've gone too long now without that stimulus of volume and other factors. So I will often find if people take too much time off, when they get back into training, there's such like this novel soreness because of being detrained that these little weird aches and pains and even sometimes injuries pop up from that. It's because of like the big pullback off of workload. So I would take the beginning of the week off, and then at the end of the week, start working back into training. And then the week after, do more of like an introductory week to kind of ramp back up before getting into your normal block. If though you're on some type of time constraint, you have a short turnaround to another meet and you need to immediately hop back into training, the thing I would for sure do is make that first week back introductory for a multitude of reasons. One, you're detrained, like you need to kind of ramp back up that workload, but also two, is you are coming into this new block in a different state than you normally would. This is not like if you do 4-week blocks. Your week 4 is now a meet week where you did decently different training leading into that Saturday than you normally would. So therefore, you're coming into week 1 in a decently different state of fitness and fatigue. And I often find if you just hop right back into training, try and run your normal block again, you're gonna find it's not gonna go the same. You're gonna find different strength fatigue patterns. And so I'd much rather use that introductory week to be able to kind of regain a base level of like workload tolerance and get back into things, and then get into your normal block structure. The next question is regarding my free program, and it's, I tapered your 15-week program and gained 45 kilo jump. Can I redo the program with new PRs? So I'm assuming that's like 45 kilos on your total, so not each lift. Each lift, that's insane. But either way, awesome job. Glad you had that much success with it. So the idea is, or the question really is, do I adjust my training maxes? And I actually am working on a video to fully encompass that question, the full guide to like when, why, how to adjust your training maxes. It'll be on Powerlifting Now sometime in 2025. But for this example, one, you 100% can run the program again, and probably should, whether it's my program or someone else's. If you have really, really good success with it, keep doing what's working. That's kind of a thing with more the general fitness population or general powerlifting population, is you run one program and then you jump to another one, and it's like this idea that like, oh, you'll get to like used to that program, so you want to keep switching up. No, if you use my program or Calgary Barbell or 531 or TSA and it's working super, super well, keep doing it. Second, in regards to adjusting the training max, I'm gonna use the example that like each lift jumped about 15 kilos. That's my assumption if you did 45 kilos on your total. I would not increase your training maxes completely proportionate to what they actually increase, because that's going to be a really, really big jump in your average intensity within the program. So what I would do is probably find a little bit of a happy medium. If you jumped 15 kilos on your actual squat, I would probably increase your training max by about 50 to 70% of that. So about 7.5 to 10 kilos, not the full 15 kilos. And because a couple of reasons. One, like I already mentioned, it's gonna make a big jump in the average intensity and the workload by jumping your training max that much. And you very well may react to the program differently because of that. Two, it's eventually going to catch up. If every single time you just kind of incrementally keep bumping up those training maxes that you run through a certain program over 10, 15 weeks, wherever it may be, you're eventually going to have those gains slow down naturally, no matter what you do. That doesn't mean the program isn't working. That's just the natural evolution of becoming more advanced within training. Eventually, those are going to catch up. So eke out those gains as much as possible while you can. Moving into the next question, things to consider when switching from conventional deadlift to sumo. So there could be a lot more to this question, just the two things I'm going to pick out, but I think these are the most important things to kind of understand. Is one, understanding that sumo versus conventional could have a different effect with squat, whether sumo affects squat or squat affects sumo, whatever it may be. So you need to understand that there could be a difference in fatigue and how the lifts affect each other between squat and deadlift when you are conventional deadlifting versus sumo deadlifting, especially because sumo is probably a little bit more close in proximity movement-wise to the squat pattern than conventional deadlift is. And then the second thing with sumo deadlift is understand you are needing to adapt to new positions. You very likely, if you've never sumo deadlift, have never been in this very wide abducted stance in this manner, unless you happen to squat really wide as well. And so because of that, there's gonna be some musculature that just hasn't been taxed in that way. And so even if you could just all of a sudden hit, like let's say you switch to sumo and you're like, oh, it's just as strong as my conventional. You could all of a sudden hit your same training max. You probably don't want to push it to that extent yet, because even though you are that strong, your body is not basically adapted or used to the workload or the intensities in that position and how that's stressing the musculature in a different way. So you want to have somewhat of a slow ramp up over 1, 2, 3 blocks, just depending on how much of a novel position this is to you. So depending on the person, maybe you immediately start sumo deadlifting, but you do a little bit of a slower ramp up to kind of get used to the positions. Or a lot of times what I have someone do is I actually, let's say they deadlift twice a week, I'll have them do sumo deadlift on their secondary day on the first block, so that we can keep it a little bit lighter. They can work on technique. They can get used to and adapt to those positions and let that slowly ramp up. And that will ramp up to whatever a peak intensity of a secondary day is, which is usually gonna be lighter than a primary, which will then give us a good starting point to move that sumo deadlift to their primary day on the next block, and then let that continue to ramp up. And so that kind of helps to control the progression over that like 8 to 10 week period to allow you to adapt to these new positions in this new movement. The next question is, benefit of using a descending rep scheme for a top set across a block. So example being like over 4 weeks, instead of running 4s the entire block or 3s the entire block, you're descending those reps in some way, maybe 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever, 4, 4, or 5, 5, 4, 4, whatever combination you want. And I've alluded this multiple times, but it was honestly just a really good podcast. On our December podcast, we actually really got into this discussion pretty deep for a couple of reasons, because one, it was kind of part of our discussion, but two, Sean Noriega just did a full video on variable top sets, where he is using descending patterns throughout a block. And so he covers that in full and how he does that. But what I'm going to cover here, and where I think maybe in my thought process where I find this could be applicable and something I might start trying to do more often, is if you've watched my video on fatigue singles, the fatigue single isn't special. It's about what we're trying to do to maintain the stimulus that makes someone feel strong. And the fatigue single concept that I presented in that video tends to work really well with mid to lighter weight class lifters. Because those are the types of lifters that, one, tend to need some certain volume stimulus to maintain their strength, and then two, they're able to tolerate doing a rep set and a single in the same workout and not get overly fatigued. Versus the opposite in the spectrum, I've definitely found that like the heavier weight class lifters, especially men who are lifting just really, really high absolute loads, being able to do a rep set and a single in the same workout may be just too much. I mean, if you've got a person who can squat 800 pounds doing a rep set with 700 for 4 and then doing a single at 750, that's tough. It's going to disproportionately fatigue them compared to someone who is lifting objectively just a lot less weight. With that said though, with those lifters who may not do well with a fatigue single model, they also may not do well with just like doing blocks of 3s and then just 2s and then just 1s, because they still have something about the volume or the intensities or the rep work that drives stimulus and adaptation. And one of the things on the Powerlifting Now podcast that Matt Cronin actually brought up is that he's pretty much just found that he can't start out the block too heavy. Like he will run 5s and it goes really, really well, but when he goes to 4s and then 3s, it's not so much that he doesn't respond to 4s and 3s, it's that like when he starts out that block a little bit heavier, just objective load on the bar because the reps are going down block to block, he just isn't able to gather the same momentum. And Marcellus actually is doing this himself, is that what Marcellus would do is you might run a blocks of 4s all the way through. And then the next block, you know that 4s go really well. It builds really good momentum weeks 1 and 2 going into weeks 3 and 4. And so what you'll do is still run 4s weeks 1 and 2. Get that baseline of momentum and adaptations and stimulus you need, and then descend to 3s weeks 3 and 4. And then the next block, maybe run 4, 3, 2, 1, and eventually build into a single, but make sure you're just starting out that block at a similar point with the similar stimulus from the rep work and then descending as the block goes along. And the benefit of being able to descend in that manner, like a 4, 3, 2, 1, is getting the practice with the exposure. You could in a sense just say, let's just do 4, 4, 4, 1, and that very well could work. But that jump in intensity exposure and the skill practice of that, of going from a top set of 4 at like a 7 to a single at an 8 to 9 from weeks 3 to 4, and not having touched those loads in a while, may just be too big of a jump in the skill practice realm and what you're used to. So that's where you can kind of, in a way, over a 3-block process, periodize how you're going to do those reps in a descending manner to work towards that single and to get that intensity exposure you need, but also not pulling back off of what is working for you earlier in the block, which, like I said, if you've watched the fatigue single video, it's the same concept, just a different way to go about it. Next question is a little bit more business specific, but what makes powerlifting now stand out? Obviously, I'm biased. I'm a co-owner of the business, but I'm also a consumer of that type of content. I mean, one of the reasons we decided to start Powerlifting Now is I would have loved to have this 5, 6, 7 years ago when I was first starting out coaching and getting into it and a newer coach in the industry. So getting into the reasons why I think Powerlifting Now stands out is, first, it's a powerlifting database with really full transparency, which I think is unique to just sporting or just business in general. Like, there's not too many places you can be able to go in any like niche that you are in where some of the top thought leaders in the industry are literally trying to tell you everything they know with hiding no secrets. Now, being able to educate means that like I've got to be able to try and find a way to take this knowledge, or Sean or Marcellus or Matt and all of our guests as well, and be able to put that into the video or audio format that we do to be able to teach you. But the fact is, there's nothing that we're trying to hide. We're trying to give you all of the information we know that is being successful and work for us and give it to you. And that's, I think, kind of a rarity in general with whatever field you may be in. So at least, especially on the coaching side, I think it's an incredibly valuable tool, especially at the price point, considering there's mentorships that go up to $1,000 for 12 weeks and things like that, or a lot of other, I've seen content databases that are $50 to $70 a month and are more just on specific topics, versus Powerlifting Now being $12.99 and literally trying to cover every topic we can think of to create the Powerlifters library with that full transparency. And the second reason I think it stands out is, while the concept of it is pretty simple, I mean, subscription services and content education, nothing here is revolutionary. But within what we're doing in powerlifting and the smaller scale of powerlifting in general, there actually is somewhat of a high barrier of entry to be able to start something like Powerlifting Now. One, you have to be able to start this business, you had to have been someone who is good at making long form content and a good educator. And that is not everyone. There's very few people who are not only good at their job, but also really, really good at educating others on how to do it as well. And so you have to have that necessary skill set, as well as not just myself, but all of the people involved with Matt, Marcellus, and Sean. Second, to be able to make this successful, we all had to spend years upon years upon years leveraging a following to actually get enough return on investment on this. Like, if I had started like Powerlifting Now 4 years ago, maybe I have a couple, like 50 to 100 subscribers, but that's not going to be a business. That would just be like a little side hustle, and honestly, it wouldn't really be worth my time. We all had to do a lot of free stuff for a very long time to leverage enough of a following to actually be able to turn that into the business it is. So it takes a lot of free time and a lot of work to even get there in the first place, as well as not just having one of us being able to do that, but all 4 of us having that leverage and that following to be able to then turn around and capitalize on and within a business model. And then the last thing that really made it possible, and I think it's a high barrier of entry, is if any one of us just tried to do it alone, it would be incredibly difficult. Like, if I was the only one making videos for Powerlifting Now, one, I'd have to make 4 to 5 videos a month, which, one, is very time consuming. It would probably end up being a full-time job versus my coaching. And then 2, I don't think I could come up with 4 to 5 video topics a month and have that good a quality. It's really, really hard to make that much content. As well as then, if people don't know, we have Marshall, who does all of our back-end work with the website, social media, uploading stuff, customer service, emails, payroll systems. He does all of that while we just worry about the content. So I would have to do that too. So the fact that we were able to find 4 people with the skill set as an educator who had leveraged enough of a following to be able to come to this type of platform and bring us together made this possible, because individually, it makes it very, very doable for us to still have our full-time jobs as coaches, but also have time to do a singular video a month, as well as the podcast, and then allow Marshall to do all the back-end work. So it's something where it would be very, very hard to make this work as an individual, as well as if it was an individual, we probably would have to charge significantly more because of how much work is having to go into it from each individual standpoint. And for the last question, what to do when a bench day that is not your primary feels the strongest? Simply put, that's your new primary day. People have differing definitions of what is primary versus secondary day. Some people hate the terminology in totality and don't even like it. I have a whole argument there that I think it's very great to have labels and concepts that be able to describe things, so that when I say primary day or secondary day, most people understand what that means immediately, and it helps to be able to communicate things in an effective manner that are a bit more complex. But getting back to the question, if not your primary day feels the strongest, that is your primary day. Because really, the whole idea of a primary and secondary day is not which is the hardest or which is the most stressful. It's what are you doing throughout the totality of the week, no matter how many days you train a certain lift, 2, 3, 4 times, is I'm trying to get some specific day during the week to feel the strongest consistently. That could mean all you do on that day is one single on bench, and that's your primary day. And that would seem, oh, that's like a tertiary day because that's really easy just to do one single. Well, no, that's the day you're trying to be the strongest, and the totality of the other days is working to help that day be the strongest. So especially with bench press, where those days get muddied a bit more because we can just handle a little bit more stress and intensity on a frequent basis on bench press, and secondary and primary days really don't look that much different. If a day other than your primary day is the strongest, 1, identify why that is, and then 2, flip the schedule of whatever you're doing if you need to now make that day that feels the strongest consistently your primary day. But don't change it too much. Don't all of a sudden change all the rep schemes and patterns and put more work on that day. Just identify that that is the strongest day, and that's the day we're trying to get peak performance, and still utilize whatever microcycle setup you're using to get that day to feel the strongest consistently. So that does it for this question and answer session. Obviously, if you have any questions, as always, comment down below. I'll be happy to answer. If you found this video beneficial, make sure to give it a like, subscribe, share it to some friends if you think they would be benefiting from it. And like I said, if you like these videos and want this even more frequently, especially from different content creators, make sure to subscribe to the Powerlifting Now YouTube channel, where we'll be uploading those live streams from. And if you're someone who wants to be able to ask questions or be able to get those form checks, make sure to subscribe to Powerlifting Now. We're going to be sending out some forms here shortly for you to be able to submit those to us. Otherwise, until next time, peace.